Okay, welcome to the video. I've decided I'm just going to go through the motions and make a read. Not so much as a how-to, but more of a this is how I'm currently doing it. I haven't made one in a few months. Let's just get started. So I've got this bit of cane. I've already got measured out, so I'm just going to put it off on the line. Start with that bit. I'm just going to have a little measure, see how big it is. The first thing I do is just see on the shooting block. Using a flat chisel, and I'm going to flatten this off. Okay, so all I've really done is just taken the inner curve out of the cane. And the first thing that I really do is got like a piece of glass, some sandpaper, 240 sandpaper, and I'm just trying to get straight parallel edges down the sides to get it to the right. So it's pretty wide at the moment. I just normally do that to see how flat they are. So as I'm doing it, I'm constantly measuring. Butter on this end, so I'm going to put that at the front. Nine, 7. I'm trying to get it down to around 13 millimeters, just a little bit less than that, I think is ideal. Yeah. .95, 12.6, 12.96. So that'll do. We'll stop there. Probably go a little bit further, but that's okay. So I haven't made a reed in a few months, mainly because it's, well, I live in Tasmania. And the reason I got into making reeds in the first place is because there's no one here that makes them. There are literally a handful of people that play uilleann pipes in the States. So this is the gouge I'm using. It's a number 6. That's to do with the curvy it is. So I'm just going to take a little bit out of the middle before I start sanding it down. Very carefully. Every time I pick up something with a blade on it, start doing something like this, I tend to slip and muck things up. I'm just sort of checking to keep it nice and even, symmetrical across both sides. So like I said, I haven't made a reed in a few months, and that's mainly because here in Tasmania, they're just coming out of winter. And over the winter months, all the reeds that I made, because we tend to have a lot of rain down here, and the reeds are very susceptible to changes in moisture. It's time to stop. And over the winter, for some reason, well, I'm guessing because it was cold and wet, all my reeds that I'd made, the back D got really, really sharp, and the C natural became really weak. So it didn't matter how, I'd have to play really, really soft pressure to make the C natural cut in. And so I found one reed that is actually working for me. So this is a 50mm bit of PVC pipe. I think it came out of a rolling pin that my mum found at a charity shop. Just have a little measure. So in order to measure the thickness of that, considering there's a curve on it, you can't just use the flat thing. So I created this little doohickey. It's just a paper clip with a little ball on the end, glued on the end. It's not actually a ball bearing. I think it's an end from like an earring. So it's got like a hole in the back, which sort of helps hold it in place. So I do that and just zero it out. And then I can measure how thick it is. bigger at this end than it is at that end. Get it. This is probably the longest, most tedious part of making a reed. So I started making them about the start of this year, around January. Sent off for all the necessary tools that I couldn't buy locally. Mainly due to the fact that last summer we had a very wet, rainy summer, and the couple of reeds that I had were very squeaky and volatile. And I just got to the point where I decided I needed a new reed, and the options down here in Tasmania are find someone who can make one for you, but it's going to be an aeroplane ride. To actually go and find the nearest person would be on the mainland. So I figured I may as well learn to do them myself. In the first few months that I was doing it, I made lots of trial and error and trying different dimensions. Gouge marks there. Keep going a bit more before I measure it. So I suppose, maybe, did I mention it? Down here in Tasmania there's maybe 5 people who play them, of which maybe 2 or 3 would call themselves beginners. A few people that play them but not that much, they don't get them out too often. And I'm sort of the only person that bothers to go out and go to sessions and get the pipes out. I sort of think it's important to show people such a crazy instrument when they're so rare on this side of the world. Still ever so slightly thicker at this end. Down here, so I keep going. So when I was a kid, well, I suppose my journey into Irish music started from a very young age when my mum and my auntie discovered it. So I just sort of grew up listening to Irish music. And many years ago, Dickie Deegan used to live down here in Tasmania. So I was sort of lucky that I got to see what that is, that crazy instrument noise that you hear on recordings of Irish music, Bothy Band and Planksty. And I sort of felt lucky that I got to see what that crazy instrument looked like, because Dickie Deegan used to busk down in Hobart very regularly. And I would say it's probably down to him that I got into playing them in the first place. I suppose the first instrument, well, I played my stick descant recorder at school. time I was probably 14 or 15, I started playing Scottish Highland pipes with the local pipe band. Because there's quite a few Scottish pipe bands around the state. I played those for a long time. Realised they weren't very session friendly, so I started playing the fiddle as well. And it wasn't for a good few years before I gave Uilleann pipes a go. I bought some Northumbrian pipes, some Scottish small pipes. Been playing fiddle a long time. And then when I was 18, I went and lived in the UK for, well, I went on holiday. Ended up staying for quite a while. Starting to look pretty even. It's a bit stiff. I keep sanding. Yes, I lived in the UK for a long time. Played with a band, did a lot of busking on the Scottish pipes. And I suppose it was around that time that I got my first practice set. Well, Dickie Deegan gave me my first chanter to get me started. And I bought a half set that had leak issues and reed issues and all sorts of. They just weren't really enjoyable to play, so I spent many years of leaving them in the case. I'd get them out every now and again. And they were so awkward and so much effort just to play that they then stayed in the case for a lot longer. And it wasn't until many years later, well, it's been about 4 years since I picked up my full set. And it's really just been the last sort of four years that I've really been playing a lot more, taking it a lot more seriously. Stiff. I can see I'm starting to get really close to the edge. Okay, so at that point, I'm going to just go and grab a little tub of water. And just let that soak in the water for a while. It's just. So the reason for doing this is because the cane is really sensitive to changes in atmospheric pressure and moisture, and doing this will help it make it a little bit more stable. So I haven't uploaded a video for almost a year, and that's mainly because I wasn't really happy with the reeds that I had. They were very volatile and squeaky, which is what prompted me to get into reed making. And then I spent a lot of last year, well, a lot of this year, just making reeds, playing them, making another one, playing them. Did a lot of busking this year, and I've decided just recently that I want to record an album. And the reed that I'm playing at the moment it's really nice and in tune, but it's been the reed that I've been using for the last few months. But the issue that it does have is the back D is it closes up under too much pressure, so it's sort of volatile coming down in the second octave, and as I play it, the longer I play them, as they warm up, the reed gets softer and softer and softer, making that back D less and less reliable. So this is the first one I've made in a long time, and I'm hoping, well, I don't know what you're going to get until it's done. So for this next little bit, I'm going to be using 400 grit wet and dry paper, just finer grain. So again, the idea of doing that is it makes the pores of the cane swell up a little bit. I should be able to smooth it off just that little bit more. I'm licking my finger to make it stick to the back of the cane. Just feeling the lumps and bumps. Yeah, so I want to record an album now that the weather's changed and summer's coming, although we're expecting another damp summer, I believe. We've already had floods in the last couple of weeks here in the north of Tasmania, and Victoria's had floods as well. You wouldn't know that there was any in Tasmania because Victoria got rained on and Daniel Andrews made a speech, so the news just concentrated on him. I think everyone in the world knows who Daniel Andrews is now. Okay, I think that's enough for that. It's still let's just go with that. Okay, from this point to mark. So in this process of like building reeds and buying tools, I've also had to create some tools. So this is like just a little 45-degree jig with some straight edges stuck on it that I've rigged up to mark out the tails. So the idea is I'm going to have to do it. Put a marking. The middle should be, tail should be. And then the awkward bit is getting the exact mirror image of the tails on the other side. Just trying to get them even and symmetrical, because otherwise it just requires more sanding later in the process. And this little jig that I've made, it's still not perfect. I have come up with a design for a better jig. But I haven't got around to constructing that yet. Okay, so now I'm going to cut the tails off. So I normally do that. Zoom in a little bit as well so you can see that I'm doing on the shooting block. Okay. I normally do it on, I use that to brace myself, and I've got like a light with a magnifying glass on it, so I can sort of see bigger details, and I normally just use a chisel to cut them off. Just gradually making my way closer to the line, making sure that the cuts are very straight and parallel. By the time I do the final one, it goes along the line. I'm only taking off a very, very small bit. I try and do the left hand ones first before I swap sides. Just because it's being right-handed, it's the awkward bit. The left side is the awkward side. Swapping hands, doing the other side. Just having the magnifying glass really does help get it as accurate as I can. So I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube. So that's the down. So that's the stage I'm at now. Tails. Watched a lot of YouTube, every YouTube video I can find that's showing someone doing this process. Some people like to pre-scrape in the middle before they cut it in half, but every time I've tried to do that, I muck it up. And people like to gouge out just the ends of the tails. I tend to just sand it on the end of the sanding block, and that's to make room for the staple when it goes in. So, more sanding. Stick with this. So I think I'll get as far as the binding today, and then I'll leave this reed to properly dry out until tomorrow when I'll finish the video off. But hopefully through the magic of editing, you won't notice. So here in Tasmania we have, I live on the northwest coast, which is I suppose the part of the state closest to the mainland. And in the south of the state is Hobart, the capital. I go down there once a fortnight, 4.5 hour drive, to attend a weekly session that happens down there. There's a couple of sessions down there, so I try and plan it so I can do a Saturday session and a Sunday session, because it's a long way to go for a session. But there's no other option. There's a session in Launceston, which is sort of in the middle of the state. And we do have one up here on the northwest coast once a month, which is growing in popularity. So I tend to try and go and keep the people who are keen to learn Irish music encouraged. Irish and Scottish music. I tend to like the Irish stuff more now. We have quite a good music scene here in Tasmania, but we do have to travel a long way to try and support all the musicians around the place. And I suppose the other problem with Tasmania is there's not really enough music venues to sustain like a full-time music career. It's really difficult to unless you live in Hobart and you just do pub versions of 80s and 90s pop. Those people tend to get gigs every weekend, but those of us that play trad, gigs are few and far between. I always look forward to St Patrick's Day. There's always a lot of gigs on that day if you can fit them all in. Okay, so now I'm at the point where I'm going to cut it in half. From my markings earlier, eyeball it there. So I haven't really got a proper halving block, but I've got like a small sanding block that I've been using for that. And a sharp knife. Ooh! That was bad. It'll be okay. Hold it. That's there. Trim that off later. I slipped there, made a bit of a bad cut on the thing, but that'll be okay. Fix that up later. So what I need now, this, so this is, I've always called it hemp. Putting some beeswax on it. Oops. Just running it through to have this bit of beeswax many years. I'm just going to tie those together. I'm sort of lining up the edges most importantly. Then I'm going to make sure that the lines that I marked at the ends of the tails are perfectly aligned. It's more important than the tonguing, because you can always trim that off. So that gap, see between the something dark behind. See, so that little sort of tapered groove is why I was sanding out the inside of the tails. It'll make more sense when we get there. Okay, so now I'm looking at how evenly those tails line up. And I'm going to put a little bit of a sand. Just going to very lightly just make those perfect. All right. Okay, so the other last bit I'm going to sand is along those edges, just to flatten them off a bit, and then I'm just going to round the corners off. So this bit is just so that when the binding goes over it, it has sort of a slightly flatter surface to grip onto. Help it seal along the binding better. And at this point, I'm sort of trying to be as careful as I can not to put too much pressure on one side, because this is the point where the two halves of the reed need to be very well aligned together. Okay, so the last bit I'm going to do is just round off those corners a little bit. So I've been making these reeds for since January this year. They're not even a full year, and I've by no means perfected it yet. It's still a long work in progress before I can be guaranteed that I'm going to make a good reed. Sometimes still very hit and miss. I'm just going to put that aside for now while I make, let's put it in there. Now, okay, the staple. The staple is like the middle, just to show a finished reed. So there's one that I've finished. These are all not quite in tune. The staple is the metal tube that's inside there. So this is just brass tubing. Tube cutter. So we're going for 50 mils. I think the other end. 40. Yeah, 39. Slightly longer one that I want. And before I do anything with that, I'm just going to file that end. This end that I'm filing will probably be the one that I end up flattening. Go inside the reed, because that end is like machine cut from the factory. So I may as well keep that as a nice intact neat end. So this is just to try and make it as neat as possible, get rid of any burrs. Right. So at this point, just a bit of turn my around. So, little hammer. So for this, I've got a mandrel with a tapered end on it, which helps shape it the way it needs to be. This part is about getting the opening of the, so it's thinner around one side, and at the moment the end is like a little slot. But keep working away, getting this nice and smooth, going in between the cane. A nice flat surface. Try not to do too much with the big file. And these little fine ones. Good. Now I'm just going to measure how wide the opening. Too big. Rather than hit it with a hammer, I'll just keep trying to file off a bit more. So I've seen lots of videos of people making reeds. People have slightly different processes. open to suggestions from people who know what they're doing. Have been doing this longer than I have. So I think that the ideal opening shape is kind of cat's eye shape. They tend to be a little bit more along and just thin and straight. Whenever I do try to get the cat's eye shape, but it tends to hold the lips of the reed open just a little bit. It's a bit harder to play. Down to about 2 mil. That'll do. Right, so before I get anything else, I'm just going to very carefully get all these metal filings. Because those are the sorts of things that you get brush against your skin and you get these tiny little bits of metal stuff, splinters, and boy can they be annoying. So that's that. Okay, so we've got that bit and that bit, and goes in there like that. Right, so I'm just going to measure how long that is. So in about the right distance. I'm going to stick it in too far, otherwise it'll make the lips open up. Okay, so that'll do it. So at the moment, that's just 85 millimeters. Okay. This is the point where we do this is a winder. I got a fair amount of this stuff from NPU, Uilleann, in Dublin. The cane came from there. Well, I think it's Spanish cane. And this is the point where you sort of need to make sure that it's sitting on there nice and straight. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up the edge with my eye, squinting with one eye and lining it up with something over here. But as I turn it around, I make sure that it's not doing wobbling up and down. So first of all, I'm just going to put on a thin layer of plumber's tape. help seal it and it will help hold it all together. To end of the staple on the inside. Smooth. Check again that it's on there nice and straight. Yes. To the binding. So this is, actually let's just adjust that camera a little bit. Better view. Okay, so this is like pre-waxed thread. It makes it nice and easy to seal. But I have to pull off more than I'm going to need before I start, because once I start, I've got one hand tensioning here, the other hand pulling on the thread. And it's, I don't know, the closest thing that I sort of can put it down to is like fishing. Pulling on the thing and I'm slowly winding the fish in, but I don't want to pull too hard. Because I don't want to waste too much stuff. Not to have to cut off too much at the end. Down, and then I'll start the binding. For the first little bit, I'm pulling fairly tight because I want the ends of the tails to be really firmly held. And once I get to about there, once the edge of the cane goes outside the width of the staple, I'm sort of easing off a little bit. If you pull too hard, you hear this little blink and you crack the cane, and all that work that you just put in is only good for the bin. So I'm winding very slowly, making sure that each layer goes up against the one before. Help the wax seal it properly. It's like holding your breath. I've seen some people and they just go and they do it really, really quickly. Too tight. So once I get up to the end of that plumber's tape, that's like where the staple ends. And go about 3 more turns. Hopefully the corners of the reed will seal up. So there's the edge. There we go. And then I'm just going to get that down. So I faster. So once that's in, I'm pulling a bit tighter now. Shut that off. I'm winding it back a little bit to help tighten it. So there we go, there's the main part of the build done. Okay, so I've got that bar. It's all bound up to there. I'm going to keep that tied on there for now. And at this point, I'm going to leave it for 24 hours because I soaked it in water. There's still going to be a little bit of dampness in there. I'm just going to leave it until tomorrow, and then I'll come and finish off and do the scrape tomorrow. Hopefully. So let's just sit that on there. That'll do. And hopefully through the magic of video editing, you won't need to wait until tomorrow to see the end. Right. I'll see you in the next bit. Okay, here we are back again. It's been about 24 hours since I put that together. So let's finish it off. So what do I need? Pop that back in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is unwrap this. Very carefully get it off so I can reuse it. Okay. Down the sides. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a bit of tape around the binding. And that's really just so that when I'm sanding it at a very low angle, I don't sand through the binding. That's really just to cover up. And I usually try and be careful not to, I'm just cutting a little bit off so that it's not fatter on one side than the other. Just up at that end. Okay, so what do I need to do? I'll get my bit of glass, flat surface again. Start with the 240 paper just to get it going, and the way I normally start is just with long ones like that until I get, well, see, okay, So I normally count these just so that I make sure that I do the same on both sides. And as I'm going, I'm trying to keep the little bit that's been sanded away. I'll try and zoom in a bit. Trying to keep that, the little bit I'm sanding away, nice and even. Do a few more like this. Good. So at this point, I'm just going to trim the end off. It's a bit crooked from that slit. Do that. I really need to get a proper trimming block. I'm just going to take off about a millimetre. And at this point, the reed's still fairly thick. But at this point, I normally swap to this is the 400 grit paper again. And I need a little bit. So I put it on the edge. I think the problem with the reeds that I make is I sand too much down the middle, which I think weakens the back D. So at this point I sort of start trying to work along the edges. Trying to do it evenly. I'm sort of leaning each side. I tend to do this phase with sandpaper. I've seen people that just go with the knife, and every time I try and do that, I muck it up. So I'd rather take my time. And do it a little bit slower. And really, I think for this phase, do with getting a slightly convex surface to help work on the edges without sanding too much in the middle. So with a bit of a squeeze, starting to crow. A little bit more. I'm only doing little bits at a time, and notice how there on the tape starting to scrape. So that's just really to protect the binding. I'm just sort of rocking side to side. And close. Just give it a bit of a scrape with the knife, just to sort of neaten it up a little bit. Those edges off. That normally sort of flattens the A and G note. There we go, it's crowing on its own. I'm just sort of sucking in the end. It's sounding quite good. So what I normally do at this point is I get a discarded bridle. Got a whole collection here. Just something to test it with before I actually make a I will make one of these. This is just really to see what it does when it's squash closed a bit. Oh, right, so I'll make another one. I'll leave that there because that might be better than the one that I made. That's just a bit of thin sheet copper, and I've got some tin snips. Chop a bit off, and this is the part of the reed making that I tend tend to spend the longest amount of time fiddling around with. I haven't quite perfected it yet. It's quite loose as it's going on there, and now squeeze it on. It's pretty good. Let's check tune. So that's somewhere between G and A. Alright, so at this point I'm going to test it in the pipes. So this bit of waxed hemp that I saved, it was wrapped around holding the tongue together. That's what I'll use. Take the tape off. So I've experimented with using wire. See if I'm on the round staple like that. A bit closer. So that's sort of 5 turns of copper wire. It can be a little bit softer than a big chunky one like that, and then the one that I've got in my pipes at the moment, I've actually got 2 bridles on. A chunky one like that at the bottom, and then a looser wire one at the top to try and help hold the lips open. Alright, let's get the pipes and see what we get. So let's just see what we've got. So these are my pipes, a lovely set made by Mark Donohoe in Kerry. I had to wait about 2 years for them, 18 months to 2 years for them to be made, and I just love them. I love them. So I'll play you the reed that I've got in there at the moment. So I've got tape on a bit of tape on the A hole and a bit of tape on the D hole, just for tuning. So it's lovely and in tune, but the problem with it is the back D closes up under pressure. So specifically coming down from the top octave, it's just really, really difficult. So that one, I've got 2 bridles on that. So the top one is just a few wraps of wire, and that's to sort of help just keep the lips open. And the real problem with this is after sort of a little bit of playing during the winter, I could play for about an hour and a half to 2 hours before it started going really, really soft, which makes that back D problem even more pronounced. But now that the weather's warmed up, it's within sort of half an hour, it's really, really difficult to, well, it's not, it just stops being enjoyable. So, let's see what we get with this new reed. It's not too bad, it's a little bit flat, so I'll seat it in a little bit deeper. So the sort of important notes that I'm listening for is the quality of the back D, how easily, I went through a phase of making reeds where the C natural wouldn't really sound with the lifting off the lower finger. That back D's a bit flat, so I'm just going to take the tape off. Put it back on, but cover less of the hole. It's a little bit sharp now compared to the rest of the notes. The lid's still a bit flat. The F sharp is slightly flatter than the rest of the note, the rest of the scale, which I sometimes find. It's not too far out. A little bit further. Under pressure, it's doing the same thing. So it takes a bit more. Lovely reed. Right, let's put the drones on and see what we get. That back D is still a little sharp when I started playing. So perhaps I should have just left the tape where it was. There's still a few funny, slightly funny sounding notes, but I think for now, let's just compare it back with the one that was in there. It's a pretty good read. So it might take a few small minor adjustments to tape on the holes. Try the new one again. So I mentioned yesterday, earlier in the video, that there are only a handful of players down here in Tasmania. So it means I've essentially had to teach myself. Well, I've got two really good teachers, one on the left side of my head and one on the right side of my head. I listen to a lot of music. Trying to pick apart what's going on with the fingers. It's got a bit of still a little sharp. That's what my ears were hearing. So I'm just covering a little bit of the hole to make the hole slightly smaller, move it further down a bit. Of course it is. So there's lots of, well, for those that play them, I'm sure they're well aware. And once you get to this point, it's just a matter of tweaking and fiddling and I'm really happy with that. That's a great read. So I suppose I will probably go and play that for a few hours and just see how it holds up. I'm sure over the next week or so it will change. That's the other issue. They can sound great when you first make them, and then once you've let them sit for a little while, they sort of close up. The tongue sort of closes up a little bit. They get a bit weaker and more out of tune. That's it. So I think I'm just going to end the video there. And please, if you are a reed maker and you have any suggestions that you can give me, any advice, much appreciated. Yeah, that's it. So that's sort of the process I go through to make reeds, and I'm pretty happy with that. Right, so I'm just going to end it there. Yeah, so hopefully I'll record a few more videos soon coming up, seeing as it's International Uilleann Piping Day coming up in a few weeks. So I'll probably upload this video before then. Hopefully I'll have something else coming up soon. And once I get a nice stable in tune read, I'm going to start trying to record a bit of an album. Awesome. Well, that's it.